On July 19, 1989, 296 souls were aboard United Airlines Flight 232, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10, en route from Denver to Chicago. What started as a routine flight would soon descend into chaos, becoming one of the most remarkable aviation survival stories in history. This is the gripping tale of Flight 232. The day began without incident. Flight 232 took off from Stapleton International Airport in Denver at 2:09 p.m. In the cockpit were three highly experienced men: Captain Al Haynes, First Officer William Records, and Flight Engineer Dudley Dvorak. Together, they had over 60,000 hours of flight experience. As the DC-10 climbed toward its cruising altitude of 37,000 feet, the mood was calm and professional. Little did anyone know disaster was lurking. At 3:16 p.m., just over an hour into the flight, a loud bang reverberated through the aircraft. Passengers seated near the rear reported hearing what sounded like an explosion. The DC-10 began shaking violently, and the flight deck was flooded with warning lights and alarms. The crew quickly realized that the plane's number 2 engine, mounted on the tail, had failed catastrophically. This was no ordinary engine failure. As the engine disintegrated, fragments tore through the tail section, severing hydraulic lines that controlled the plane's flight surfaces. In an instant, the crew lost all conventional means of controlling the aircraft. Passengers, unaware of the full extent of the problem, began sensing that something was wrong. Overhead bins rattled, the plane's movement felt erratic, and the usually composed cabin crew showed subtle signs of alarm. Meanwhile, Captain Haynes and his team faced an unprecedented situation, one that even their extensive training hadn't prepared them for. The DC-10 was designed with 3 independent hydraulic systems. Theoretically, the failure of one or even 2 systems should not incapacitate the plane. But in an unprecedented event, all 3 systems were compromised. Without hydraulics, the crew couldn't control the rudder, ailerons, or elevators. The massive aircraft was essentially unsteerable. Captain Haynes later described the moment as complete disbelief. The DC-10 began an uncommanded right turn and started to descend. It seemed inevitable that the aircraft would crash. However, the crew refused to give up. Amid the chaos, the flight attendants worked tirelessly to maintain calm. They moved through the cabin, reassuring passengers and providing updates. Despite their own fears, they focused on ensuring that everyone followed safety procedures. Amid the chaos, First Officer Records noticed something unusual. By varying the thrust on the remaining 2 engines, they could influence the plane's direction and altitude. It wasn't precise, but it was something. Working together, the crew devised a way to steer the plane by carefully adjusting engine power. It was a crude form of control, akin to driving a car with only the accelerator. Meanwhile, Denny Fitch, an off-duty United Airlines flight instructor who happened to be aboard, volunteered to help. Fitch made his way to the cockpit and took over managing the engine thrust. With his assistance, the crew began to stabilize the aircraft, though it remained perilously difficult to control. Fitch later recalled the intense focus in the cockpit. The team had to synchronize their efforts perfectly to keep the plane steady. Every adjustment required split-second timing and absolute precision. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. The nearest suitable airport was Sioux Gateway Airport in Sioux City, Iowa. Air traffic control cleared all runways and prepared for an emergency landing. On board, the flight attendants briefed passengers on how to brace for impact. Many wrote final messages to loved ones, aware of the slim chances of survival. As the DC-10 approached Sioux City, it became clear the landing would be anything but conventional. The crew couldn't lower the flaps fully, making the landing speed dangerously high. They also couldn't align perfectly with the runway. Despite their best efforts, the aircraft descended in a right bank. Meanwhile, emergency services on the ground prepared for the worst. Fire trucks, ambulances, and rescue crews lined the runway. Their readiness would soon prove crucial. At 4 p.m., Flight 232 touched down hard. The right wing struck the ground first, tearing off instantly. The plane cartwheeled down the runway, breaking into pieces. Fire engulfed much of the wreckage as terrified passengers scrambled to escape. Despite the horrific impact, 185 of the 296 people on board survived. Survivors described the scene as surreal, a mix of fire, smoke, and the piercing cries of those injured. Emergency responders, already on high alert, acted swiftly to extinguish the flames and rescue survivors. Their efforts undoubtedly saved lives. Among the survivors were passengers who recounted moments of human connection and courage. Some helped fellow travelers escape the wreckage, while others comforted the injured. These acts of bravery amid the chaos became a poignant part of the story. The investigation revealed that the cause of the disaster was a microscopic crack in the fan disc of the No. 2 engine. This crack, undetectable during routine maintenance, had grown over time until it caused the disc to fail catastrophically. The incident prompted significant changes in engine inspection protocols and hydraulic system design. The crew of Flight 232 was widely hailed as heroes. Their extraordinary teamwork and ingenuity in the face of unimaginable odds were credited with saving many lives. Captain Haynes humbly stated, "We were just doing our jobs." Denny Fitch's contribution was equally celebrated, highlighting the value of experience and quick thinking in crisis situations. The crash also sparked conversations about mental resilience and emergency preparedness. The flight attendants, often unsung heroes, received recognition for their calm and decisive actions that undoubtedly saved lives. The story of United Airlines Flight 232 is a testament to human resilience and the importance of teamwork. It also serves as a stark reminder of the potential consequences of even the smallest oversight in aviation maintenance. Today, the aviation industry is safer because of the lessons learned from that fateful day. Modern aircraft designs have incorporated fail-safes to prevent a similar loss of control. Training programs now emphasize handling multiple system failures, ensuring pilots are better prepared for rare but catastrophic events. The crash of Flight 232 remains one of the most studied incidents in aviation history. It's a story of tragedy and triumph, of loss and survival. For the passengers and crew who lived through it, the memories of that day will never fade. And for the rest of us, it's a powerful reminder of what can be achieved when courage and determination take flight. On July 19, 1989, 296 souls were aboard United Airlines Flight 232, a McDonnell